Greetings from the depths of the unknown. Welcome to Paranormal M, your beacon in the darkness of the supernatural. Subscribe now and enable notifications, and stay tuned for our latest explorations of the unexplained. Get ready to be mesmerized. The summer of 2001. It was the summer of 2001. I was a wild kid growing up in Panama City Beach, Florida. I would have been 14 years old and, like most kids, raised in broken homes in the wild place PCB once was. I was already smoking and kind of being a shithead. At the time, I was a runaway, staying at my quote-unquote girlfriend's older brother's house in an attempt to grow up too fast and do what I wanted. It was because I didn't like my mom's rules. It was a typical evening for us. We were smoking cigarettes, skateboarding, hanging out, and just kind of causing trouble in the apartment complex. An apartment complex that backed up to a set of woods, with my friend's 18-year-old brother kind of place being at the end of the building, kind of closest to the woods. A sidewalk extended out from the front door, connecting to the primary sidewalk, which then wrapped around the building. That's between the woods and the building. It brought you to a parking lot. When the sun was starting to set, we smoked cigarettes outside on the sidewalk. And when they were ready to go in, I flicked the one I was smoking, a half of the cigarette because I started to get a headache and didn't care to finish it. We went inside, played video games, and eventually passed out. The next day I woke up at around 11. Everyone else was still asleep, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to smoke a cigarette by myself. Because I knew that we didn't have many left, I went to go out and get one pack, and it was empty. I guess Chance, my girlfriend's older brother, had smoked the few remaining while we played games and slept. Then I thought, wait, I flicked that half of a cigarette last night, so I'll just go and find it. I walked down the stairs, got to the sidewalk, and started skimming the ground, looking for it. I walked around the sidewalk skimming for it, and I just couldn't find it. When I looked up, I was roughly 4 feet from the perimeter of the woods, right at the edge of the woods, kneeling behind a palmetto. I saw it. A large monster. It was covered in mangy brown hair as tall as I was, but I couldn't see legs. It looked like it was crouching. I saw teeth, large solid black eyes. I was frozen in fear. I had no idea what to do, and it was quite literally right in front of me, a mere 4 or 5 feet away. I finally got the courage to run. Bolted up the stairs, yelling, "Chance, Chance, Chance!" I was tripping over every step on the way up, and he was my girlfriend's brother, so we were staying with him at the apartment, and I told him what happened. Of course, he laughed it off and told me I must have hallucinated it. After convincing him to go look, we went right back down the stairs together, and of course, it was nowhere to be found. My friends now laughing and me panicking, adrenaline still pumping and the brain just trying to process like the whole encounter. And like I mentioned, it was 2001. I was 14. I'd never heard the word cryptid. I don't think I knew what Bigfoot was yet, and I was completely shocked. I spent the next 2 weeks totally obsessed. Got every chance to scour the woods with me and found, I got a chance to scour the woods with me. We found absolutely nothing. It was 11 in the morning. I knew exactly what I saw, and now 23 years later, I can still picture it exactly. As time passed, I thought I'd just seen a demon. The teeth and all the black eyes just kind of stuck with me. But when I was roughly 22 or 23, I was telling what happened to a friend of a friend, and she said, "Oh, hell, you saw the Florida Skunk Ape." I'd never heard of the Florida Skunk Ape. But eventually when the picture surfaced, or when I first saw the photo, can't really remember, it was exactly what I saw. Shit, The picture itself was almost identical to my account with only one exception. It was daytime and I could clearly see its top half. I was stunned. I finally knew what I saw years prior. And that one incident, which lasted for probably just a minute, changed my life and the perception of the world entirely. But looking back now, over 20 years later, what I believe happened is we both weren't expecting to run into each other. I think it was just as shocked as I was. And we both didn't even know what to do, so again I realized that I didn't do anything aggressive, never made a sound, and it just crouched or knelt there, frozen. Kinda just like how I was. Maybe he got that half of the smoke. Just got reminded of a time when I seen a little shadow person, and it was confirmed by my uncle. When I was like 6 or 7 years old, I was sleeping in the den of my grandma's house. That was while my parents were having a bonfire outside and drinking. It was definitely sometime after midnight, but I woke up suddenly for some reason and started looking around the room in the dark. I seen a little person dressed in all black. He had a little hat and a little cape, but it looked like a shadow. He ran across the room and into the closet. The closet door was closed, so he ran through the door. I got so freaked out I screamed for my mom. She heard me and came inside. I told her what I'd seen, or rather, what I seen, and she believed me. Apparently, my grandma's house was crazy haunted. I'm not sure if it was the same night or a different night. My mom told me this year later when I was older, but my mom was telling her brother, who was my uncle, what I saw. She said that I'd seen a midget in all black. My uncle cuts her off and asks, "Did it have a newsboy hat and a cape?" She said yes, and he says, "I seen him too." He was sitting on the wall behind the avocado tree one night. He was smoking a cigarette watching me. He said he seen the cigarette light up when he was talking, or rather taking a drag. Then he disappeared. Super crazy, and I don't know what to make of it. If he's able to smoke a cigarette or even a shadow person, a demon, it's like it was sentient. What could it be? This was like 25-ish years ago. Sees shadow person, proceeds to shit bricks. This happened around 10-ish last night. I'm not really good at keeping time since I'm a night owl and a massive stoner. Just to give a little context on me. I was very stoned at the time this last night. I wanted to find my cat from outside after working on my computer for like 3 hours, feeling good. .jpg. So anyways, I step onto my stairs and I lead down the 3 steps. Be standing on the bottom step, calling out to Cat, to come here. But after about 5 minutes, he's still not there. He's a cute little bastard, but will claw the shit out of you if you don't give scritches, because he's an outside cat. So don't really worry about leaving him outside. I start looking across the street just outside the lamppost, lighting at my neighbor's porch, and see what looks like the reflection of a fly in the light casting a shadow. You could probably imagine what I felt when I realized that it wasn't a shadow, but a head with no figures. Just black. It was probably like 4 feet tall, and just within the shadow, looking around like a cat in a new place, really like head bobbing, if that makes sense. Sort of. Say, fuck this, and immediately feel weird. Like my motor skills were dampened in some way. Feel really slow, then when I get inside, like 5 seconds later, realize I forgot the fucking cat. There's no way in hell I was leaving my house. So watch out the window for like 20 minutes and chalk it up to weed or sleep deprivation. Eventually fall asleep. What is really weird is that when I told my dad earlier this afternoon, he told me that he's seen a 7-foot-ish figure in his rearview mirror while leaving for work. Haunted House, India, Guwahati. We were 3 friends searching for a house in Guwahati. We finally found a house. We were desperate, so we booked the house as soon as we talked with the owner. So we shifted the very next day. Presumably moved. Maybe. Things were smooth. It was a split-level house with 3 rooms on 3 different floors. Let's call the person on the ground floor A, or Adam, and the one on the second floor B, or Ben, and me, C, on the 3rd floor, Carl. Slowly but gradually we all started feeling things, but we never talked about it because we were preparing for the APSC and the exams were coming. Started getting disturbed while sleeping. I felt like somebody was staring at me through my door. It was getting very dark and strong, becoming very difficult to sleep. Well, it was getting very dark and strong. It was becoming very difficult to sleep. I could only sleep around 4 or 5 a.m. when the sunlight hits. After a while, I talked to Adam about it, and he started telling me about the same weird things I was facing. Then we talked to Ben. He didn't experience anything like this at that point of time. He started hearing sounds. The sound of kitchen utensils, running tap water, walking on the stairs, and closing and opening of windows. Up to this point, we were ignoring it and focusing on the exam. One evening, Adam and I were studying together on the ground floor. Ben was studying in his room on the 2nd floor. After some time, Ben came down the stairs and entered the kitchen. Adam and I were aware that Ben had come down and went inside the kitchen, but he wasn't coming out, so I asked, "Hey Ben, what are you doing in the kitchen?" No reply. So I asked Adam, "Didn't Ben just come down and enter the kitchen?" He replied, "Yeah, he opened the kitchen door." I said, "Wait, let me see what he's doing." I went to the kitchen to see what he was doing and why he wasn't replying to us, and I was shocked. The kitchen door was never opened, and there was no one there. I ran upstairs and saw Ben at his study table taking an online test. I asked him, "Did you not just go downstairs and into the kitchen?" He had no idea about it. He never went downstairs, and it was something else. We 3 sat together, lit up cigarettes, and said, "Fuck." Eloquent. After a few weeks, Ben went to his home. That's in Nagoan for some work. Adam and I were studying in his room. Adam said Ben also went home. I can't even say when he returns back, and believe me, Ben replied from his room saying, "Hey, wait, I'm coming downstairs." We looked at each other, eyes wide open, and we both ran upstairs, but there was no one. And it was the limit for us. In bold type font. So we started researching what was going on in this place. We knew an auntie in her neighborhood. We asked her about the house, and she said, "Yes, around 1998 there was a murder in the house. The husband murdered his wife and left the body. The body was found only after a week by the owner, which was the uncle. He lived nearby. That's because of the smell." She also added it was around 2010 or 2012, and there was a tenant who committed suicide by hanging. We were like, shit. After the exam, we left the house. I'm attaching a photo from the CCTV motion detection camera. We had a small gym in our boundary. The photo was captured on the first night when it was installed. There is no such thing that could reflect, nor any such equipment. There was a motion detection camera, and the gym was closed. I didn't absorb any of that one. Skeptic turned believer. Many years ago, my now wife and I worked at one of those, in quotes, most haunted places in America. I've had paranormal experiences, and this was since a young age, but always alone. My wife didn't believe in anything but science. She would entertain me by listening to my stories and theories, but would always politely defer to there's probably a realistic explanation. The place we worked was a combined hotel and restaurant that had been operating in one form or another since the 1700s. About once a day, one of our coworkers would explain something paranormal-ish they just saw or felt. Stories about things flying off shelves across the room regularly, hearing voices, feeling like they were being breathed on or grabbed. My wife enjoyed the stories, but just couldn't believe them. One summer day, the boss asked me to go upstairs. Wanted to go out of the U's hotel area and bring down extra chairs for the large group. Upstairs was set up like an old house, filled with antique furniture and very faded old rugs. It was early in the day before any customers were there, so my wife followed to help. Young and flirty, we were chatting and giggling as we made stacks of chairs to move. After a few minutes, I heard a child giggle, felt the bounce of the wooden floor as if a child was running. Moments later, a little blonde girl with long, curly blonde hair, dressed in a light blue dress over a white top with high white socks and black shoes, ran past the door. You could feel the floor move and hear her laughing and happy, heavy breathing and footsteps as she ran past the room we were in and ran to the room at the end of the hall. I turned to my wife and say, "Did you just see that?" I run to follow the girl, and my wife follows. We get to the room, and it's set up like a child's room, like a small bed and a desk. I see nothing and then check the only closet underneath the bed. My wife is red and breathing excitedly. I ask again, "Did you see that?" She goes, "Yeah," while nodding her head. So I ask, "Okay, but what did you see?" She says, "A little old-timey looking girl ran past the door giggling and into this room." I ask, "Was she blonde and in a blue dress with black shoes?" Wife squeaks, "With like a white top and high socks," as she turns white. I can't squeak. I say, "Okay, let's get the fuck out of here." We run down the hall and stairs and go to the back parking lot area. My wife is walking in circles trying to rationalize what happened until she starts asking me about my beliefs. Trying to squeak ruined my own voice. We both calm down and I say something to the effect of time to go back and move the rest of the chairs. My wife refuses, asks if I'm scared. I say, "Yeah, I'm spooked, but the ghost or echo has happy, positive energy. I don't think it means to harm anyone." We both have had more mutual and individual encounters since. So, has her opinion changed a little bit? Question mark. Events leading up to my guitar getting struck in the middle of the night. After the event last night, where 2 strings of my guitar were suddenly struck very loudly, I decided to share everything I've experienced. This is because I feel that there are people here who understand or have gone through similar experiences. Over the years, quite a few things have happened, and every time something occurred, I wrote it down. Everything below is a collection of events spanning several years. A few years ago, my parents, sisters, and I moved into a house that we now currently live in. At the time, the house was in poor condition. The garden looked like a jungle. The house needed a significant renovation before we could move into it. In the first few months of living there, everything seemed fine. After a few months, I started noticing flickering lights. I'm quite skeptical about these things, so I thought there might be an issue with the electricity or something like that. One evening, I was home alone and cooking. Above the stove, we have a range hood with lighting that's fully controlled by a touchscreen. I was cooking calmly when the light on the range hood suddenly went out. I didn't think much of it and turned it back on, and I walked to the trash can and suddenly heard and saw out of the corner of my eye the range hood, which was on level 2, go back to level 1. Then it turned off. I look at the range hood in surprise, and just when I thought I'd seen it all, the light went out again. Around the same time, I don't remember exactly if it was the same week or a few weeks later, I started having nightmares. For 3 nights in a row, I had dreamed I was in my bedroom, either watching TV or just waking up. Each time I was grabbed by a hand or a leg by the ghost of a girl, which woke me up in shock. One of these dreams is the most vivid in my memory. It went as follows. It was the weekend, my parents had gone to bed. I have a TV in my room and I'd turned it towards my bed. I was watching a movie in bed in the dark, but must have fallen asleep. I dreamed that I was lying in bed, getting tired and wanting to sleep. I searched for my remote, turned off the TV, but couldn't find it. Thought the remote must have fallen off the bed. I reached next to my bed and felt the remote. I grabbed it and pulled my arm back, only to suddenly be grabbed hard by my wrist. I woke up with my heart pounding. I saw the TV was still on and the remote was just lying next to me in bed. Months passed without any incidents or anything to note, and my parents went on vacation. I was home alone for like a whole week. On the second evening alone, I was comfortably watching TV in the living room with the cat on the couch. It was about 1 a.m. when suddenly my cat, who was asleep, jumped up and looked around nervously with a bushy tail. After a minute, she laid down and slept. Like 5 minutes after that, she showed the same behavior. Indeed. This time, she didn't go back to sleep, but stared for a long time. She was staring at this one spot in the living room. She jumped off the couch and walked through the room, but while walking, she kept staring at the same spot. She stopped, continued staring at that spot for a long time. I felt uneasy and decided to go upstairs. Once upstairs, I heard a loud bang downstairs as if something large and heavy had fallen. I quickly went downstairs, but couldn't find anything that had fallen. I only saw my cat standing there again with a bushy tail. I got really creeped out and quickly went back upstairs. I had just gotten into bed when I suddenly heard the stairs creak step by step. There were sounds as if somebody was coming up. Like I said, my parents were on vacation. I couldn't be anybody else. I was home alone. So I hurried to my bedroom door and locked it. I turned on all the lights, sat upright in bed, staring at my door. Nothing else happened. After a few hours, I fell asleep out of sheer exhaustion. In the weeks that followed, I started hearing things falling. I could never find what had fallen. I talked to my mom about it since I needed to get it off my chest, and she told me she also heard things falling. This was a great relief to me, knowing that I wasn't the only one hearing or experiencing things. Fast forward, a few years went by without major incidents. Sometimes a flickering light or something that seemed to fall, but nothing more. I was in my bedroom. My wired headphones were lying on my desk, with the front and back on the desk and the middle part sort of dangling off. I was sitting still in my bed with my back against the wall when suddenly I saw the part of the headphone wire that was dangling off the desk start to swing back and forth vigorously. The swinging motion lasted for about 30 seconds before stopping again. I could have been caused by the wind. I was sitting still and both my window and door were closed, though. That same evening, I saw a shadow dart past me. This marked the beginning of new incidents and the appearance of shadows, often in the same spots. One evening, I was home alone with my mother. We decided to watch a movie together. In the hallway by the front door is a cabinet with snacks. I grabbed some treats for both of us for the movie. In the middle of the movie, we both needed to use the bathroom. The bathroom is also in the hallway by the front door. So after watching the movie, we decided to go to bed. We cleaned up, walked into the hallway together. To our surprise, the front door, which we had both walked past several times that evening, was suddenly now wide open. We were both startled and the hairs on our arms stood on end. My mother quickly closed the door and I started searching the entire house, but I found nothing. Incidents continued to happen. We once heard knocking on an interior door, but no one was in the room behind the door. The strangest and scariest incident happened last week. I was gaming and felt like having a snack. Went downstairs to the snack cabinet and took out a big bag of mixed nuts. I closed the door, turned toward the stairs, when suddenly I heard my nickname. Dan. Dan with 2 A's, is that how you do that? Oh, excuse me. Dan. Whispered into my right ear. It wasn't a whisper, but very, very loud and clear. The voice also sounded very much like my mother's voice. It quickly turned around, but I saw no one. Thought maybe my mother was in the bathroom and needed toilet paper. I opened the bathroom door, but no one was there. I quickly checked the living room. Nothing. Then I checked my parents' bedroom, but both were sleeping. The next day I asked my mother about it, and she looked surprised. Told me that she hadn't been in the bathroom that night. She said she got chills from what I told her, and she also mentioned that earlier that week she was in the kitchen and heard a deep sigh coming from the living room and thought it was me. She said she went to the living room, but nobody was there. My mother asked me if we should bring someone in to maybe help us out, but I don't know. Ghost of a man who vanished while I stayed at my sister's flat when I was a kid. Basically, when I was a kid, I took 2 weeks off of school. Basically, I just didn't turn up for 2 weeks and made it out that I had a cold so I could stay at my sister's place. The first night there, I was terrified to go to sleep. Must have been around 9 or 10 years old at the time. My sister and I watched a film. My sister had a Chucky doll from Child's Play sitting in her window. I was terrified of Chucky, as when I was 5, my sister made me watch it because she thought it was funny to scare me. And I was pretty much still scared of him at 9 or 10 years of age. I tried to ignore the doll and fall asleep on the sofa, which was where I was sleeping due to no more beds. I did manage to fall asleep, and then 2 to 3 hours later I woke up. It must have been around 2 or 4 a.m. and it was pitch black. I had an eerie feeling come over me. It made me more scared than I was. I looked around the living room, and when I turned toward the living room door, which was closed, there was a man standing there looking at me like he was confused why I was there. At the time, I assumed he was a caveman, due to my knowledge of history, but now I can imagine him being medieval with the fashion looking from that time period. As soon as I locked eyes with him, I shouted my sister's name on the top of my lungs, to which my sister woke me up, to which woke my sister up. She replied, "What's going on?" And soon she opened the door to the living room. I know I made a mistake, Echo. This man literally vanished in front of my eyes. My sister ran in and asked what was wrong. I told her about the caveman standing there. My sister turned the lights on and turned to the area I pointed at, where I don't see anyone. He was definitely there. My sister said if anybody was here, the dogs would be barking, but they were fast asleep. True, the dogs would have, went mental at any trespassers, but the man looked so real. And to this day, I still think about this experience and how much it freaked me out. First time I ever saw a ghost, and definitely wasn't my imagination. Haunted Museum in Washington State. The Westport Maritime Museum is known by many locals in Grays Harbor area to be haunted. It used to serve as a Coast Guard station until the 1970s. During its service, there was a lot of trauma involved. An auxiliary building next to it was once used as a garage and temporary storage facility to store the dead bodies of shipwreck victims after a disaster at sea at one point. Various employees and locals have reported orbs, footsteps, shadows, and tingling sensations. One day in October, my coworker and I were having some downtime as there was very little traffic coming in. We heard a bunch of banging and footsteps upstairs, sounds of something heavy being dragged across the floor. I got up, ran to see what was going on, and no one was there. Fast forward a few months, and the same coworker and I do a ghost hunt one night after hours. During our ghost hunt, she felt something brushing up against her leg and skirt. Simultaneously, I felt this intense rush and negative vibe. I felt the energetic sensation of somebody rushing at me. As we reviewed the footage at the same time, she felt the physical touch and I felt the rush. The video camera and audio glitched, and a scratchy, raspy voice can be heard on tape saying, "Get out!" When I saw and heard this on our tape, our blood went cold, and our eyes watered. Carl from Olympia. Inspiration, empath. This was October of last year. I was working as an insurance agent at the time. I am also a metal musician and was in the process of recording vocals for my second album, which was released in November of 2023. I was also struggling with some serious grief-related depression due to life events that I will not specify here. I had had a great day. I was working with clients, enjoying time with coworkers, and the work on my music was going very well. I got off of work, recorded the vocal tracks, felt good about my day's work, and felt proud of myself. All of a sudden, the depression crept back like a phantom into my mind, like a demon standing over my shoulder. So I decided to go for a walk down Main Street, to clear my head. It was a beautiful evening, and during a glorious autumn on the coast of Washington State. My depressive thoughts were unbearable. As I got nearer to the beach, I began contemplating drowning myself in the harbor nearby the beach. I struggled with suicidal ideation since I was a teen and survived an attempt in 2017, saved by my amazing parents. The way I saw it, high tide had come, and I was considering letting the ocean take me so that my soul could be free and my physical body could once again become one with nature. Just then I see a casual but well-dressed, friendly-looking older, late 60s man smoking a cigarette and peacefully walking toward me from the beach. He asks me if I can give him directions back to his campsite. He was from out of town and had gotten lost on his own. I never say no to strangers in need of help, so I obliged. On the way back, he and I made friendly small talk on the way back to his campsite. Work, seafood, and life. As we reached his destination, he looked at me very sincerely, asked if I would be willing to pray with him. I am a believing but liberal Christian. I respect all religions and belief systems, and I'm also fairly reserved about my faith. I typically don't talk religion with others. Nevertheless, this man had a warmth, sincerity, and kindness. It's really, pretty rare, but hard to feign. We began to simply say a prayer. He asked God to provide him with comfort, or rather me. I acknowledged the pain I was feeling even though I had nothing saying, like I didn't reveal to him anything about my depression. He said he could tell I was lonely and dealing with grief and in need of comfort. It was as if he could read my mind, and I began sobbing and I hugged him. He hugged me back and he said a few more uplifting words to me. We both chatted while looking into the starry night sky for a few minutes, said our goodbyes and parted ways. He identified himself as Carl from Olympia. My ghost stories from Kyukuk, India. I used to live in the Midwest, and to add some background to this story, the town I lived in is believed by some of the inhabitants to be extremely haunted. I was living with my family in a medium-sized home near the edge of a wooded area. It's in a relatively quiet neighborhood, too. The house we lived in was owned by a Vietnam veteran who was a helicopter gunner. All of us thought that the house had a creepy vibe to it, but it became a bit more real when my brother told me he had heard what he described as male voices speaking an Asian-sounding language in an adjacent room one night. Another experience I had when I was at work, I ran to the pizza kitchen at a local Casey's store in town. When not busy making pizzas, I would occupy myself with busy work, inventory, cleaning, etc. One night I was at the kitchen counter facing out into the store. I saw the shadowy figure of a man walking through the aisles. He was very thin, very tall, appeared to be wearing a hat of some kind. I saw him for a brief moment and he vanished. I asked some of my coworkers if he'd ever seen anything, and about 5 other employees confirmed having seen a similar thing. Sometime later I was closing the kitchen one night, and as I'm coming into the kitchen area, which faces the office, my coworker asks me if there's anyone out on the sales floor. I confirmed that no one was there, and she said that she had been watching the security camera that overlooks the sales floor. And as I was bringing in a piece of kitchen equipment, she had seen a shadowy human form on camera, coming right toward me as I was walking back into the kitchen. The general area is located on and near native burial grounds. Interesting, disturbing, and reoccurring dreams and nightmares about World War II. I was born in 1996. I'm American, but I speak German and have many German friends. Since I was in my mid-teens, I've had reoccurring dreams about World War II. This is both from the perspective of Allied and Axis soldiers. I'm trying to figure out what these dreams might mean. I will list the dreams as best as I can in their order and detail. First dream I can remember, I was an Allied soldier, American to be precise, and one of my comrades got into a brawl with a German soldier. I came up behind the German and stabbed him to death quite graphically. I was simultaneously horrified but also relieved and satisfied at the lifeless, bloody mess I had made of this formerly living human being. Second dream, point of view switch. I was a German soldier fighting in the Battle of Stalingrad. I was leading a platoon of other German here, regular army. Not necessarily Nazis, but fighting for Hitler nonetheless. We were clearing a house at night. I was the point man, armed with a submachine gun. As we broke into this house, I had this gut feeling that there were Russians just hiding behind a wall in a closet facing the front door we came in. I sprayed the wall with my machine gun and heard several Soviets scream in pain and fall dead behind the wall. Third dream. I was an American soldier in France during the Normandy campaign in the summer of 1944. I somehow had gotten separated from my unit. I saw a fat middle-aged German soldier riding up to me on a motorcycle. He stopped the motorcycle and looked at me. For some reason, maybe I was out of ammo, I began to swing my rifle at him like a club. I had the aim and goal of bludgeoning him to death. He grabbed my rifle mid-swing and smiled at me, told me he was a French conscript forced to fight for the Germans against his will. He told me he had friendly feelings towards me and didn't want to fight. In a fit of rage, I screamed at him in German, "Warum denn kämpfst du an der Seite dieser unmenschlichen Tieren?" Why then are you fighting on the side of these subhuman animals, referring to the Germans? I then beat him to death with my rifle, committing a war crime and a grievous sin against another living soul who had shown me kindness and friendship. Final World War II dream. I was an American soldier again and came across a young wounded German soldier hitting him in his foxhole. And I, knowing German, told him I would take him back to his unit and make sure his wounds were treated. I didn't capture him. I returned him to his unit. Odd. As I walked with this wounded German up to his unit, I addressed a lot of them in German, saying, "Diese Kill braucht einen Sanitator." I'm trying. This guy needs a medic. And then calmly turned around and walked away. I remembered my dream expecting to be shot in the back of the head, but the Germans not only didn't shoot me, they let me walk away peacefully. The Germans were sitting under a large tent, somewhat like a pavilion, and looked at me aghast and in shock that I so brazenly and unarmed walked up to them, returned their wounded comrade, and walked away calmly without surrendering. It was a much more positive dream than all my previous ones. Utah hauntings. These stories take place in the time period of 2003 to 2014. I originally come from Utah, but haven't lived there in years. We've lived all over the United States since then. So, here's the first ones. Chronologically speaking, in 2003, my then stepdad, who was, an abusive, controlling, and, treated my mother, my siblings, and I horribly. And it began escalating his behavior. I noticed a pattern that as he got worse, strange things would happen around the house. Family members and I would hear disembodied voices throughout the house. A strange presence would be felt at some times and then not at others. And most notably, we would see shadow figures running around the house. These were not tall, humanoid figures that you typically think of when you think of shadow figures. These were deformed, almost animal or alien in nature, moved extremely fast and had an almost impish quality to them. We would occasionally hear a man's voice in the house calling our names. We left the house, moved to a different neighborhood north of Salt Lake City in Bountiful, Utah. 2004-2005. After settling to our new home in Bountiful, I guess that's a place. In August of 2004, other members of the family began noticing strange things. Footsteps would be heard in the hallways late at night. My mother would be working in her office at her computer and occasionally hear footsteps. And one night, she felt something touch her back. She turned around and there was no one there. Later, my mother saw an apparition of a young girl wearing white standing at the end of the hallway. Thinking it may have been one of my sisters, she went to go check to see if everything was all right. The girl disappeared, and my mom saw that both of my sisters were both still sound asleep in their bedrooms. After doing some research into the history of the house, we learned that a young girl had passed away from leukemia in the same house a number of years prior. Her bedroom had been the same room that was my mom's office. The old photo of the girl who passed away matched the appearance of the apparition that my mother saw at the end of the hallway. 2006. As the behavior of my then stepdad began to become even more abusive, so too did the occurrences in the home. Our family dog would frequently panic and bark and howl at nothing in the air, especially when in the basement. Paranormal events culminated in a few members of the family, not me though, seeing about a dozen entities, semi-translucent in appearance and of ghastly appearance, surrounded by former stepdad, and he was sitting in his chair one evening. In October of that year, around the same time the apparitions were seen, our family dog tragically died by being attacked by a pack of wild animals, either raccoons or coyotes in the middle of the night. Coyotes, I would assume. 2007 and 2008 were pretty quiet for the most part. So, on to 2009. The year opens pretty uneventfully, but activity starts ramping up big time in the spring or early summer. On my brother's birthday in June of 2009, I lived at my grandparents' house with my family. I was in the front yard waiting for the rest of the family to come out of the car to go for birthday outings. About 300 yards away, I see a young woman wearing what looked like a 1980s punk clothing and blonde hair and some kind of a side ponytail, walking casually down the street and screaming for help. Her voice didn't sound normal, though. It sounded much farther away than a mere 300 yards, and it also sounded kind of dreamy. Fair enough. I was in a neighborhood with a lot of houses and trees, and was on a hill. So the acoustics weren't that, sold it for me. I immediately went inside and told everybody that there was a girl crying for help down the street. We got in the car, drove up and down the streets looking for her. And keep in mind, it was midday, everybody else was still at work or school. This was literally a few days before summer vacation. So, unless she was a resident, she wasn't. It was a small neighborhood where everybody knew everybody and didn't look familiar at all. It would be rather unlikely that she could have disappeared or gone somewhere before we reached her. Later learned a young lady matching her description died of a drug overdose in the 1980s in that very neighborhood. That same month, in 2009, my family and I went to a cinema to see Monsters vs. Aliens. It had come out in March of that year, was still playing in theaters in June. While my brother and I are watching the movie in our seats, my mom leaves with my sisters to go to the restroom. They come back shaken and terrified. "What happened?" I asked after the movie. My mom and sisters then tell me that my mom had been picked up and thrown out of her shoes by an unseen force while walking down the hall. When she got up off the ground, she was 5 feet from where her shoes were. They were still standing upright in the spot where she was standing when she fell. For the years 2010 and 2011, I didn't live in Utah, but had experiences elsewhere. 2012 was relatively tame and had little in the way of notable supernatural experiences. In 2013, I didn't live in Utah, but I had multiple experiences while living in Tennessee. On to the next Utah stories. 2014 in April. I was staying for a few weeks with grandparents. My family and grandparents had gone out one day to have a fun day outing, do some shopping. This is in the same neighborhood as the story from 2009, and knowing in our family history that Grandma's house had some strange activity, the previous owner of the house had been murdered. We all knew there was something off about this house. Well, on one particular day, the vibe was particularly off. I was home alone, chilling out, just no mood for ghosts. Felt like there was a very unwelcome and wrong presence in the house. I had a short temper that day and told them to fuck off. Leave me the hell alone. Called them a series of horrible insults. Sat down to play guitar and unwind a bit. And then from 30-ish feet down the hallway, I heard a woman moaning coming from my grandma's room. I was home alone after hearing this noise, and my blood went cold and I froze. "Hello?" I managed to say. And sort of as stoic and friendly of a voice as I could muster, I didn't get a response. keep myself from shitting my pants and running out of the house, I scoffed and told myself, "Oh, it's probably just the cat." My grandma had a tabby cat named Lottie at the time. It was one of my best friends. She later passed away in August of that year due to old age, but I'd never before or since heard her cat or any cat make a noise like that. It was a human noise. I was a police officer, and I think I witnessed an actual curse. I used to be a police officer in a city in Virginia. There's one upscale neighborhood in our city with very nice homes. I was always told stories when I was a new officer that there was a doctor who lived in one of these homes. The story goes the doctor attempted to perform some type of operation on himself. He numbed his stomach area to make an incision on himself, but since he couldn't feel it, he accidentally cut far too deep and large and accidentally disemboweled himself. When officers and paramedics arrived, he was found barely alive, holding his own intestine, and ultimately died. Fast forward, I was assigned a call about a young female who was found dead by her older sister. When I arrive on scene, it's in the aforementioned nice neighborhood. When I exited my vehicle, I immediately had an uneasy feeling about this house. While nice on the outside, it just had a bad energy surrounding it. As I approached the front porch, I noticed countless empty energy drink cans and a Ouija board on the front patio table. Everything about this house just felt wrong. When I was led inside, the family was obviously very distraught. I was told the deceased sister, we'll call her Emily, was in the basement, and at this point another officer had arrived also. And so he stayed upstairs with the family as I entered the basement. The basement was an unfinished and fairly dark one, minus 2 pull-string light bulbs, one on each side of the basement. The scene in the basement was similar to the front porch. Energy drink cans were everywhere, and another Ouija board was on a small coffee table. Emily, who was 19, if I remember correctly, was hanging by her neck in the basement rafter. She had hung herself with an exercise band. She was swinging back and forth slightly. Her face was blue and bloated and contorted into a horrible expression. Another officer helped me lift her to bring her down. Emily's family consisted of her mother and father, and her older sister. Her parents stated that they had been trying to help her because all she did was drink the same energy drinks to stay up all hours of the night playing on the Ouija board. Her sister gave a little more detail about it. Being sisters, they stated that they were very close. They told each other everything. Her older sister said Emily indeed had an obsession with the Ouija board, drinking energy drinks to stay up all night and talk to what she believed was her boyfriend who was dead. Her sister stated Emily had been saying that her boyfriend was begging for her to come join him in the afterlife, and so she believed that's why she did what she did. Now, let me reiterate. This house felt wrong. Everything felt bad, and I had a very uneasy, sick feeling being in the basement. Not because of the dead body. It wasn't my first. This was a call that really messed with me for a while. We really never got much more explanation. As cops, you kind of just have to move on to the next call. 2 weeks later to the day, I get a call about a car accident with ejection. I moved to the call code 1, lights and sirens. We arrived to find a convertible BMW with the top down, which had experienced an obvious horrible crash and rollover. It was sitting on its wheels, and in the driver's seat was a woman who clearly had a broken neck, as her head was almost all the way turned around. Next to the vehicle, about 25 feet away, was a man. He had been ejected. And keep in mind, this was a convertible, so he was ejected from the top of the car. He was missing the entire top half of his head, and there were pieces of brain everywhere. I went to close off the scene with yellow tape. I walked around 75 yards away from the accident, where I found yet another large chunk of his brain. I'm not trying to be intentionally graphic, but I want to paint the picture of just how bad and violent this car accident was. Upon obtaining the man's ID, I read the information off to dispatch. Then another officer and I both realized the same thing at the same time. This two people were Emily's parents, who were 2 weeks to the day just died in a horrible way. Breaking the news to the older sister was heartbreaking. Kept in touch with her for a little bit. Well, she had inherited her parents' estate and all of the life insurance money. She ended up selling off everything and buying a different house to try to start over and repair her broken life. However, it doesn't end there. Around 1 month later, another officer was called after a pedestrian was struck by a car while she was jogging in her neighborhood. And yes, you guessed it, it was the sister. She managed to survive several weeks in a coma, but ultimately didn't make it. If you're wondering why the story about the doctor's relevant, the house that Emily killed herself in was the same house the doctor lived in. I don't know what you guys think, but to me it definitely seems like either that house is cursed or Emily opened up something bad. It was a few years ago now, and I'm no longer a police officer. Moved a couple states away now. Twice now, I found 2 different Ouija board planchettes on the sidewalk when going to check my mail. I never touch them and usually use a stick or something to push them into the storm drain. Demonic self seen in old childhood. Can someone explain? Maybe someone might be able to help me. Today I'm 38 years old. It had been a long time since I was a child, but I keep remembering some kind of demonic twin of myself that I've seen when I was something around about 4 to 8. I can even remember exactly what it looked like and how it behaved. There was definitely some kind of me version, but with short hair that stood in all directions. Finger and toenails that were sharp, black claws, and very sharp, spiky, brown-like teeth. It used to mostly come out during evenings or nighttime, but in very few cases, even at daytime. When it did so, it crawled into my room through any wall, always crawling at the walls and ceiling like Spider-Man and then sitting in one corner, facing and watching me with a very, very evil grin with dark red eyes. Never hurt anybody, nor did it do anything evil at the time. It just kept sitting somewhere staring at me, grinning like it was thinking about eating me. Maybe now, maybe later. Sometimes it even warned me with a shush finger to be quiet when it was bedtime. Somebody came up the stairs. I only once told my sister, it's about 4 years older, about that creature. But no wonder she didn't believe me, she couldn't see it. The demon thingy knew that, laughed at me and gave me some kind of only you sign. It did never really talk to me, and on the laugh itself, it was kind of freaking silent. Today it makes me think if anybody maybe was able to hear it at least. I know how weird that sounds, but I really wonder if that was my imaginary childhood friend that in my opinion should have been a little less fucked up. Maybe a little bit more friendly, kind and playful. Can't remember how often I've seen that creature, but it's definitely a rare encounter. Or rather, not. Or as they put it. But it was definitely no rare encounter. Aha. Can anybody maybe explain what that might have been? Why did it disappear all of a sudden? Why did it look exactly like me, but like some version directly from the deepest depth of hell? And least but not least, did maybe anybody else encounter something similar during childhood? Why the hell can I remember 30 years later? I remember exactly how that creature looked like, but I don't even recall my mom's face that's died 11 years ago. Well, that's horrible. My mom's house might have a haunted object inside. Throughout my childhood, I've experienced a few encounters or other unexplainable events. My mom, sisters, and I lived in a mountain range since 2010. This mountain has a long history of being a vacation destination. Celebrities would come and ski in the winter or lounge by the lake in the summer. It's been this way for about 100 years. Before it was a vacation spot, it was a gold rush town. Before that, it was inhabited by Native Americans. Needless to say, this place is old and has a lot of history. My mom owns a thrift store. That's where she receives hundreds of donations every week, and from brand new, never-been-worn clothes to old and antique home decor. Owning a thrift store means that we get our first pick of the items before we put them up for sale, and, well, probably most of our decorations and paintings and home furnishings came from the thrift store. A lot of these items are old and we don't know their history or even the owners. Anyway, we moved around a lot in this town, house to house, never staying anywhere that long. Thrift stores don't make somebody rich. So a bit of context. My room was on the bottom floor of the house with its own staircase leading down to it. And yes, I know this house sounds massive, that's just how a lot of houses are in the mountains, multi-level. My first encounter was one morning I was getting ready for school, and at the bottom of the staircase there was a person standing there, in broad daylight. I couldn't see any features or even tell you what they were wearing. It was just a dark figure standing there. I was fully awake, looking at it. Just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. No explanation. Later that night, I told my older sister about what I had seen. She said we can cleanse the house and my room. We did a cleansing spell, and she's a white witch. And as soon as the spell was done, I got a bloody nose. I'm not saying that was related to anything, it was just one hell of a scary coincidence for a 14-year-old boy. Throughout the next few months, my family and I would experience other things in the house. Things like incoherent whispering or sounds like somebody was in the house when no one was out of bed or in the middle of the night. We would often smell cigar smoke, even though none of us smoked. Our closest neighbor was far away on his backwoods mountain road, all things that we can't explain. We moved to the next house, and we lived there for about 5 years. In that house, I've witnessed glass cups randomly exploding to a bunch of small shards all over the place, door opening and closing randomly, cups of water jumping into the air and falling to the ground. This is when I started to believe that the house weren't haunted, but in fact, items that we brought from the last house to the new one. In 2021, In 2021, when I was 21, I moved out to the city, got an apartment with my older sister, leaving my mom and younger sister there. Experienced nothing until 2022 when I helped my mom move into a new house. In late 2023, I was visiting them. Lights flicker and strange sounds, which is usual for old houses because that's what most of these homes in the area were, old. But it wasn't until my mom and I were talking in the kitchen that we watched items from the open pantry shelf fly across the room. If my mom didn't witness it with her own eyes, I doubt she would even believe me. The next day, when I was home alone, my mom was at work and my sister was at a sort of a cheer practice. And someone called my name. I heard it loud and clear coming from the inside of the house, and I have no explanation. In early 2024, I went back and visited again. I was in her guest room at 3 a.m. on my phone before sleeping, when the door just swung open. Watched for a minute or two before I heard knocking on said door. The knocking was sporadic. Every time I tried to record it, it would stop. Went on for 15 or 20 minutes. I was ready to go to bed now, so I politely asked it to stop so I could sleep, and it did. I think my mom brought home a haunted item from her thrift store. Whatever is attached has just come for us. House to house, too. I wish I knew what it was connected to, but we have so many old chests and lamps and paintings and who knows what else. All I know is that it's never directly tried to hurt us. And I'm okay with that. Curiosity killed the cat. I've seen spirits since I was little, gotten a little bit more prominent since I've gotten older. I'm scared of them and feel crazy, at least. That's what I tell myself. I see them more in the mind's eye kind of a way, and I see their clothes and everything. I've ignored them for the simple fact that my father is a preach, and I've grown up being told that they're not loved ones, but they're demons. I don't know, but I feel that it's not always the case. I mean, yes, some are, and they trick us, but some just don't feel like they are. I get a feeling from them, my chest gets heavy when they're around, and some have bad feelings and others have not so bad feelings. It scares me, and I just don't know how to help or interact with them, or even if I really want to. I had an experience one time when I kept seeing this woman, but she never showed me her face, and it just went on for maybe almost a year of seeing her. Well, I told my friend about her, and what she was wearing, and come to find out, she was his niece. She wanted me to talk to him for her, so I tried. I was right about knowing things only she would know, which was crazy, and then she showed me how she died through her eyes. She was decapitated, and that really messed me up. Yeah. That's when I stopped really acknowledging them altogether. So as I've gotten older, I don't hear them and don't see them, but here and there. And oh, by the way, I'm not on drugs, and yes, I thought I was nuts, but always had confirmation that let me know I was real, and still deny it. But my gift has been passed to my children as well, so my son, who's a firefighter, sees them and they show up in his dreams. Some of them are people he's seen being a firefighter that have lost their lives, like at instance, things like that. My other daughter just feels them, and my youngest sees things sometimes. Look, like I said, my family's religious as well as myself, so I really don't know how to deal with this. Prayed about it, talked with my father about it, but all I can come to a conclusion is that I'm nuts. Any advice would be obliged. My experiences at my mother's house. To start, I remembered things when I was 15 and 16. We had this attic, and around 1 to 2 a.m. every night it sounded like walking above my room. I had a girlfriend over to stay the night once, and she even heard it. So I knew something was up, and during this phase of my life, I was a drug addict. I had some bad stuff going on, and the more bad things that happened, it seemed the activity would increase and react more. I remember that same age, at like 16, I was home alone one night. My mother's room was across mine at the end of the hall upstairs. There's 3 rooms over there and a bathroom. I heard scratching at my door and opened up thinking it was my dog, but instead I was met with pure blackness across from me in my mother's doorframe. I couldn't do anything but freeze and stare at it. It was maybe 2 minutes, 5 to even 10. I just couldn't move. I then snapped out of it and ran outside to my car, called my friend and left. Age 17 and 18 is when shit got real. I switched my room to my brother's old room. It was smallish, 2 closets, winter and summer, 2 windows, ceiling fan, and my dad left the home. My mom found a new boyfriend and was always gone. My brother left for the girlfriend, and I was always alone at night. What started in this room, I usually would lay my controller and TV remote and all my shit on the foot of my bed. At night I noticed something clicking the buttons and moving my keys. This turned into my covers being pulled off and a woman's voice coming from the hall mimicking my mom's voice saying my name. The big thing that set shit off was me and some friends going to a notoriously haunted hospital for children with an illness. We had a horrible experience there. And when us 5 left, we all had experiences at home that night. Mine was the worst. I woke up at 3 a.m. on the dot. I had 5 to 6 posters up. My TV was on, and then all of a sudden my posters started simultaneously sliding down my walls to the floor. My closet flung open. The TV shut off and my candle fell to the floor. I screamed and my family rushed in to see the mess. I started to sleep with the rosary after that. Kinda helped some, but random shit, I don't know. like weights would roll across the floor. I'd silverware swirl. Stuff would come up missing. My dog would go into fits when I was alone, and he'd growl and cry for me to come downstairs. My lights in the house would turn off and on, and one day, I was playing piano. My back was turned. I heard my door creak, and I felt the hand of a child grab my shoulder. Turned around slowly, absolutely shocked, and said, "Don't touch me. You are never to touch me." My door then closed, and I was fucking losing it. Moved out after these two things. One, I had a dream of a girl with pure black hair crying. I was in bed with her, and she was at the window. I was getting up. She turned to me and had pure white eyes and said, "It'll be okay." I also had a dream of my grandfather that same week, and he told me, "Winter is the shortest season, my son." I also had pure white eyes. 2, I saw her in my hallway, her apparition, black short hair, white gown, pale as ever. My dad woke up and said he saw her as well, pulling his sheets off of him when he was trying to sleep. We both moved out of this, and well, a few years back, was this an evil spirit? Was it harmless? Should I never go back? LOL, I think about a lot.